Welcome to episode 180 of the Startup Show. Today, Janic, who is a founding partner of BackBone Ventures, is stopping by here at the studio, and we are talking about his motivation for being in venture capital, how they empower the next generation of entrepreneurs by looking for impact, and why it's important to think as reaching for the stars as your motivation. Make sure you stay tuned for the whole video. Welcome to episode 180 of the Startup Show. Today we are sitting on the other side of the table again, when we have a venture capital fund here at the table. Thank you so much, Janic, for stopping by. And I'm very excited to hear everything about you. But let's talk first about you.
Thank you, Cedric, for the invitation. Pleasure to be here. First of all, my name is Janic. As you mentioned, I'm 27 years old. I'm born and raised in Zurich, actually, yes, and also studied here as well. Apart from my job, maybe I also love to do some sports as a balance. For example, I like to go skiing in the mountains, where my grandmother grew up, actually, in Closters. Yeah. I don't know if you know it.
Yeah, sure.
And also I'd like to play ice hockey besides my work, what I'm doing. And yeah, that's maybe as a short introduction of myself.
Being in venture capital usually is reserved for either the rich or the people who already made it, like some entrepreneurial. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your journey, how you moved into venture capital.
Prior to venture capital, I worked rather in the banking sector.
Yes.
I worked quite a long there. After my studies, I was looking for something else. So as a new challenge, for example, also due to the restrictions and all the regulations in banking, it changed a lot. That's why was the main reason for me to look in different directions. And I came up with venture capital and private equity in the first place, and started off working at the smaller venture capital / private equity firm, where I also met my partners, Miklos Stanek, Diego Blumotti, and Philip Bennett.
Yes, but maybe you can tell me, like, what is it that excites you about venture capital? I mean, like, it's such a competitive market, very hard to make decent returns. How come you decide, like, this is like where you want to be?
I think in general, it's a very diversified market. In general, it's just very interesting to work with very young people, to support them and try to help them to reach their goals they have, and to see all the different technologies they are in the market as well. So this is very interesting for me to work in this area, and that was my main motivation to work there.
So let's talk quickly about BackBone Ventures, where you're one of the founding partners. Maybe you could just give a quick rundown about like what you guys do.
Actually, we are quite a young venture capital firm here based in Zurich. We are 4 partners, and what we are doing, we are acting as an early stage investor, focusing mainly on ICT and food tech, ICT in general, so information communication technologies. As I mentioned, we are an investor at the early stage, so it lies between seed fundings until to Series B.
When you look at the startups, I mean, like you probably have like a right selection of startups that you could potentially invest in. What is kind of like the selection criteria? What are you looking at, you know, in a first or second step of the companies?
I think one of the most important factors are like the product and the market fit. Does it come to the right time? Will it be interesting in the future to have an impact on either, I don't know, economical, environmental or social factors, for example? So those are quite important for us.
I get this point. I mean, like it is definitely something important to have like this impact, but like, can you like validate like those claims that you have for these startups in a data-driven way, or is it more like a belief or gut feeling that you have towards the startups?
Also, always a gut feeling in general, because as you know, as an early venture investor, there is not much of material you can look at. So you always you need to have some kind of a feeling that might be very challenging often.
It's not so simple. I mean, again, in VC, you probably like, you know, you have to look at things that are more into the future. Once you decide, like, let's say to invest in these startups, I think as of now you have 6 or 7 portfolio companies. What is kind of like the structure that you have as kind of like the VC?
Behind us as a VC, we are, maybe I didn't mention that before, we are investing on a deal-by-deal basis. So we only do direct investments. So we have like a private investor pool behind us. It's changing now more and more to also institutional investors. Mainly there are asset manager and family offices. And we are pooling them behind us, and then investing as one shareholder into the startups.
Yes. So you were saying like right now it's more like a club deal setup.
Yes.
Are you also planning to do like a regular, more like traditional VC, or what are the plans there?
Also, we plan to have classic funds. That is our goal for 2020 as well. But we want to keep our current business model as well, because the private investors really like it to invest on a deal-by-deal basis. So in this case, they really can decide if they want to invest in a specific company or not.
Or just give you the full trust of like, you know, the best ones. What's the plan for this VC? You said by 2020, do you have already more or less kind of like the size that you're looking to raise?
No, we're not quite sure yet. We're only working on the strategic matters, but on the size, we're not quite sure yet.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit more about like what I saw on the website, like empowering the next generation of entrepreneurs. I mean, like that's a very big claim, and I would say like many people do this, and I like to think big. But maybe you can elaborate a little bit about what you specifically, or how you define this word empowering, because again, like we want to understand like what is in it for the startup besides the capital that you bring to the table.
Well, first of all, maybe in the word next generations, because it's getting used more and more often. As you know, we are a quite young team, and we also love to work together with young people. On the one hand, you have the startups. Usually they are quite young, so we try really to help them to reach their goals and their visions they have. And on the other hand, we more and more want to address not only like normally the usual private investors are rather older, and we also want to address and reach or make the awareness bigger for younger people, that they also have the possibility to invest in startups. So that's what we try to bring those two stakeholders together and work together, and all in all, that's how we call it, to empower this next generation ventures.
From what I understand is like you have like you want to also like have an impact, but not only on the startups but also on the entrepreneurs, correct?
Yes.
So, but can you maybe explain a little bit more how are you trying to add value specifically post-investment? So like, you know, many companies or many VCs these days, it's not just about like, you know, giving money. Money is one thing and it's an important thing. But is there anything that you can, let's say, pinpoint one of your portfolio companies, like one of the examples that you can say, look, this is how we helped company A do the following?
Well, first of all, it's very important not to only give money, of course. Most of the VCs, or actually all of the VCs we know and work together, they try to do that. And I think that's also very important. First of all, I think the network in general can be very important. We have quite a broad circle of advisors behind us that have specific expertise in the scientific side of each technologies. And there we bring them together, that they can help them as well. Apart from the usual business supports that we give and the money we try to raise for those companies, also to work together with them on a long-term basis. Maybe if in regard of expansions, when we have focus mainly in Switzerland, out of resources mainly, and we try to work as closely as possible with the startups. And it maybe in the matter of startups, if they want to grow and want to go abroad in different countries, specifically I could name maybe Yamo. They are looking to expand in different countries, and we have an advisor who has a lot of expertise in this area, and we try to help them with him together, for example.
I mean, thank you for mentioning Yamo, a previous guest on the show. I think it was episode 98, if I don't remember.
I saw it. I've seen it. Yes, I've seen that.
But maybe you can explain a little bit more, like the business impact. I mean, like you said, this network, and I believe you that you have a great network and a lot of people. But again, like what would be for Yamo, like, you know, like you said the expansion. Well, what does it mean, the expansion? Do they want to, like, are they looking for a distribution abroad, or what is it specifically that like a startup can say, like, wow, I really believe that they don't only give me money, but what else can they do for us?
Absolutely. For example, as you mentioned, the distribution is quite tough. Normally, for example, when you try to work together with retailers, it's normally quite a long process until you are able to put your products you have into the shelves of the retailers. And it often helps when you know specific peoples, for example, to maybe fasten this process. That will be an example.
On the website, I see this idea of the positive impact that you have And I did look at your portfolio, and I did see like what was the meat company? Supermeat?
Supermeat, yes.
I think I totally understand like why there's a positive impact, but you have to explain to me Neon. I mean, like it's a great case, I like it, but like maybe you can explain to me across your portfolio of companies, like how do you decide if something has a positive impact?
First of all, I have to say we really try to have as much as an impact as possible, but sometimes it's not as big as Supermeat comparable,
Yes.
of course. But for example, Neon, I mean, they try to digitalize everything, so there will way less paperwork and stuff like that. So that might be an impact as well.
Yes.
But yeah, in the end, it's a big word, impact, of
Yes.
course. But really, we try.
You have, I think, 2 companies are based out of Israel, and the rest, I think, is in Switzerland. Maybe you can explain a little bit like how you have access to these deals, or like how do you like really make sure that your deal flow is not coming just from Switzerland?
Well, we had the focus, or we have to focus on the first place on Israel because we think it's also a very interesting market. It's a big hub there. They also get a lot of support from the state as well. In BackBone itself, we have a big shareholder, and it's an asset manager, and the origins of the asset manager comes from Israel. So there's the connection, and yeah, that's the reason why.
What is your strategy? I mean, like one of the key things of VC is like really to have access to the deals. How do you make sure that like you really get the best deals on your table?
When we started off, I have to tell, we started very actively to search for deals. We were overwhelmed how many deals there are actually in only specifically in Switzerland. I mean, there are a lot of deals, and also a lot of interesting deals. But now it changed also a little bit since we are working together with a couple of different venture capitalists and private persons as well. So often we receive the most interesting deals from other VCs, and we are always exchanging with each other. We are exchanging our deal flow as well. Yeah, I would say that's why it's very interesting to work with them together as well.
Well, what's this fashionable world now? It's like collaboration or something like this.
Yeah, I would say so.
Where you like collaborate, but you still have this competition of accessing the best deal. Because, you know, I mean, like in Switzerland, it's a big thing to kind of like share the deal. When you look into other countries such as Israel or so, like you will see that like the biggest VC, they believe, you know, they have the best deal, so they want to do it themselves versus like sharing them. Unless they're very big tickets and your VC is small.
Often I have to say I don't look at it as a competition mostly, because we really try to help each other and try to work out the best case for a startup, and that often makes sense to have those collaborations and work together, because sometimes we have the network and others have more the expertise in this specific area, and sometimes the other way around. So it often makes sense to work together. Yes.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, you gave me the segue to kind of like valuation, which would have been one of the next questions to ask. I mean, valuation is a big thing, specifically in early stage, where you know, classical Excel investment banking models, let's just DCF,
doesn't work that
don't really work that well. I'm not saying they don't work at all, but they don't work that well. Access to numbers is just not available yet. Maybe you can elaborate, just like, you know, like let's think I'm an entrepreneur and I want to hear just like your thought process behind the valuation before you sign this check.
The overall goal for us is mainly that all the stakeholders that are involved can agree up like a valuation that everybody can accept and is happy with it. I mean, you have a lot of different methods. For example, you can do the benchmarking to compare the company you're looking at with similar other startups, or you can use the venture capital method, for example, that you can evaluate the valuation in the future of the startup when you look at the planned income statement, for example, and you're just discounting it back to the actual date. So those are the possibilities, but I think in the end, the main goal is that everybody can live with the valuation. Of course, the startups try to have the valuation as high as possible normally, and the investors rather the other side. It's always the goal to have like the golden middle.
Till they wrote the check, and then they also want the highest valuation.
That's true. That's true.
Yes. Let's shift our conversation a little bit more towards the venture capital industry, because I think it's a very interesting market opportunity right now. Not everybody agrees, though. I mean, like when you talk to the banks, especially like, you know, client relationship managers who deal with the very big clients, they say a lot of people take out risk of their portfolio because it seems like we are before a recession. Nevertheless, you see in Switzerland a lot of micro VCs, everything between 5 and let's say 25 million size of venture capital. How do you perceive this, let's say, in the next couple of years?
I think at the moment there's a lot of going on in Switzerland. I think it's good because it's really about time. I mean, when you look at all other countries in the world, specifically in America and also in Israel, there's a lot of support from all sides, and Switzerland is changing into a good way, I believe. But I think there's still a lot to come. I think there should be even more than now, specifically early venture investors as well, like us. It would be good if we have more and more pillars to support all this ecosystem and to grow together. So I think this is very interesting and also very positive for the future, not only for Switzerland, but also for the world. Yes.
When you look at the mega trends, you know, like usually as a VC, you have kind of your investment thesis, how you perceive the world in 10, 20 years, and you try to bet against those investment theses. What is it kind of like that you are looking at that you would say, like, those are the major trends that we have to look at right now that will be relevant in, let's say, 10 years from now?
I believe, or we believe, if I would have to name three, for sure, one of them would be in the food sector, because we are developing in a direction where we have a lack of resources, specifically in the meat industry. We need to look out for alternatives, and I think this area will be very interesting in the future and very important as well to work on that. So, for example, as you mentioned before, Supermeat is working on this as well to replace the industrial poultry production. And so this is one very important sector, I would say. The other one many people are talking about, and I know specifically, is in all the banking systems. I think the processes are very much outdated, especially in the compliance area. There will be, I think, a lot of opportunities to develop those processes to the better, that it will be way more efficient than it is nowadays. Last but not least, I would say all the topic around gaming. It's one of the fastest developing markets in the world. So that will be very, very interesting in the future as well. And that we are looking into it.
Sure. Like esports or more like gaming, or?
I would say gaming in general.
Because gaming in general, they are usually the early adopters in every industry.
Yeah. So. I mean, when you look at the technologies, there's still also, in my opinion, they're still very outdated. You have a lot of hardware that are actually not necessary anymore. So there are also a lot of possibilities for new technologies, and I believe there will be a lot to come.
From a consumer perspective, let's say if you would have to define or like, let's say, describe kind of like the human being in 20 years from now, like what would you say are like the major things? Like, let's say the smartphone is today, what are, let's say, the main component that there will be kind of like a no-brainer for everybody to use?
It's
a very difficult question. But I hope you thought about it.
I think the direction into all the autonomous technologies, those will be very interesting. Not only driving for vehicles that are driving on the ground, but also in the flying area. There will be a lot of changes, I believe. So
which is one of your investments, I guess, Flytrax?
Flytrax, for example, they're working on the food deliveries with drones, but they created the software for it. So the efficiency will improve a lot, and that is also a very interesting case, I have to say. Sure. There will be also, I think, a big topic will be the autonomous flying. We see a lot of companies working on eVTOLs, the electric vertical and takeoff and landing vehicles, but they have, in my opinion, a big bottleneck, and that is still the human. I think they will be looking for new technologies that will change that.
Sure. Definitely interesting. I mean, like, I definitely share some of these opinions, but we'll definitely see again in 10 years when our children will watch this video and say, like, look, Janic was right or wrong.
I hope so.
Anyhow, that's fine. Let's talk a little bit about the local ecosystem. I mean, like, you see probably most of the deals are from Switzerland. How would you perceive, let's say, how would you define and talk about, let's say, the local ecosystem, maybe specifically here in Zurich or also like Swiss-wide?
I mentioned it before, I think it's growing quite rapidly. As I mentioned as well, there are a lot of startups. Unfortunately, in compared to how much funds we have in Switzerland, I mean, we are quite kind of a rich country. There are a lot of funds, but they are still not deployed or not that often deployed into startups. I think mainly because of the lack of awareness, and there will be a lot of changes in the future. A lot of people are working on it as well, so I'm happy to see that. I hope it will be a growing future, especially in the startup ecosystem in Switzerland, not only in Zurich but in the whole country.
Yes, but nevertheless, I want to challenge us a little bit because again, like 2 out of your 6 or 7, I'm not sure, I think I saw 6 of the portfolio companies are from abroad, which leads to me like, why can't you find these companies here in Switzerland, these type of companies? Do you think there's anything that is like kind of lacking in the Swiss startup ecosystem? Because on one hand you say like there's a lot of opportunities to invest, but on the other side, like still your portfolio is, at least a third is abroad.
I mean, from our view, I would say we don't have a lack of technology and knowledge. For example, we have great universities and so on. From our perspective, it's not always the approach is to work together with our co-investors and our private clients. And they also want to have to focus on Israel, and that's the main reason why we are looking also for specifically in Israel and Tel Aviv in specific for deals. But still, I believe the startups in Switzerland are minimum as same good as somewhere else.
Yes. How do you see, let's say, Switzerland startup ecosystem on a global scale? I mean, like specifically now when you look at a couple of deals in Israel and here in Switzerland.
As I mentioned, I think we're still not as much developed and to compare to abroad, specifically on the institutional level. Yes. For example, there in America you have a lot of pension funds that are investing in startups. I think here it's still quite a long way to go there. That will be the usual thing to do, to invest in early stage startups. But in general, I think we're on a good way.
What is a successful investor for you?
Successful investor, I think, is that you have on the one hand, you have some kind of an impact, either on a social way, environmental way, and on the other hand, you still can reach a return for your investors.
What has been so far your biggest challenge running the venture capital fund?
I think so far the awareness that is still lacking a lot for a lot of people, that they don't know about the possibilities you have to invest in startups. So to find the funds you need for those investments you like to do.
How do you deal with failure on a personal level, but also like, let's say, one of the startups?
On a personal level, I always try to talk about that. I think that's very important to talk to close people that are close to you, and to process those failures. On the venture capital level, it's quite the same. So you have to talk about it, and I mean, there are always downs and there's always ups. And during the downs, you have to try to keep a cool head and go through with it.
What do you say is the best tip for startups to get an investor on board?
I would say even if you have a very complicated technology behind your idea, that you can explain it to the investors very easily. So even if you don't have an expert or on the other side of you, that you can explain it very easily and that they will understand it very quickly.
And now when you look at all the startups, what would you say is the most important character in an entrepreneur?
I think to really go through, to take the risk and really to go through with this idea. Actually, I just mentioned it before, I think, so it really, I think for me it's very important that if you have a vision or you a dream, maybe it sounds a little bit cheesy, but if you want to follow it, just go for it. Don't always listen to everybody else, and just try to take the risk and reach your goal that you have.
Very good. Reaching for the stars. I think that's a nice way to end this episode. Thank you so much, Janic, for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you very much, everybody who stayed all the way till the end of this video. Make sure you stay a few more seconds so you see who is up next Monday. Have a great day, and I'll see you next week.
Hi, I'm Thomas Stubendorfer. I'm the co-founder and president of the Swiss-sized Investor Club, which is the largest and most active angel investor club in Switzerland. I also am the initiator of the Swiss Angel Investor Handbook, which helps people to get into angel investing here and explains about the specifics in Switzerland. Now, next Monday, stay tuned to have me on the show with Cedric. I hope to see you there. Bye.